The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, this is Sarah Butler at Faith Trust Institute. I want to welcome you to today's webinar, The Challenge of Maintaining Healthy Boundaries in Ministry, a conversation about emerging issues. I'm going to introduce our presenters in just a few moments, but first there's some technical information you should know. First of all, you should be able to hear my voice through your computer or phone, as well as see the technical information slide on your screen. If you're having problems with the sound, you might check to make sure that your speakers or headset are plugged in and that your volume is turned up. If you're having technical problems, I recommend that you exit the webinar, return to the link in the email that you received, and then try to reconnect again. All audience members are muted throughout the presentation. If you have questions or comments, you can submit them anytime using the question box on the right side of your screen. We would love to hear from you. We're going to have about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation to take your questions, so please submit them anytime. And then if for some reason you don't see the question box, you can click on the little orange arrow that's on the right side of your screen. That will expand the options so you can see the question box there. The slides that you see on your screen during the presentation will be sent to you as a PDF file later this afternoon, so you'll have them as a resource for later. And lastly, we're recording this webinar to make it available on our website for those who can't join us for this live session. So we are welcoming people in the future who may be listening to the recording. We want to thank the In-Faith Community Foundation for sponsoring today's webinar. The In-Faith Community Foundation is a national charity with a mission to serve donors, spread joy, and change lives. This series is part of their Ending Family Violence initiative. They've sponsored dozens of webinars in the past few years, and you can find recordings of many of those on our website. Please visit infaithfound.org to read more about the great work that they're doing, and we thank them for their sponsorship and for their commitment to ending family violence. One of our presenters today is Reverend Lizann Bassham. She is currently the campus pastor at Pacific School of Religion. She's an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and has taught and written curriculum on religion and the arts, sexuality and spirituality, and youth ministry. She's been a trainer with Faith Trust Institute for several years, focusing on curriculum related to healthy teen relationships and violence prevention. Our other presenter today is Reverend Jeffrey Spencer. He is an ordained UCC minister and serves as senior pastor and teacher at Niles Discovery Church in Fremont, California. He's published curriculum for adults on the death penalty and has previously served as a juvenile detention chaplain. So audience members, I want to remind you that you can submit your questions anytime using the question box. And Lizann and Jeff, I'm going to turn this over to you. Are you there?
I am. Sarah, thank you so much. We are both here. I'm wondering, Sarah, at the just top of it, if you would do that first poll so we have a sense of who else is in the room. That would be helpful.
Okay.
So those of you that are with us, we're just curious to know who we're speaking with today. So if you could take a moment and indicate if you are a clergy person, a lay leader, an advocate or social worker, or in some other role in the work that you do. That would be marvelous. What we'll be doing today is talking a lot about social media and technology and how that has impacted our understanding of healthy boundaries in this work that we do. And I would like actually to start just by saying welcome. And I'm looking at the response in the poll, and most of our folks it's kind of split between clergy and lay folk, and then we've got some folks that are in other agencies and others. So it's a nice variety of people today. That's wonderful. So I think. Yeah, so I think the first thing that I just want to begin with, which for me is kind of the meta statement of all boundary discussions, whether we're talking about face-to-face ministry, whether we're talking about using technology, but whatever we do comes from a quote from Marie Fortune when I was at a boundary training up in Washington. She was talking about that boundary training just in general and the way we look at boundaries is how to help really good people not do stupid things. And I just think that's brilliant and have loved using that as a way to put everything in context. And for me, I think the other piece of that is the way that good people cannot do stupid things is for us to be as healthy as we can in our entire lives. So not even just thinking about our ministries, but the more balanced we are in terms of taking care of our bodies, making sure that we have a good balance of work, life, a good balance of people in our lives who we are not responsible for, but we have a good mutual relationship with, depending on our needs in terms of introverts, extroverts, having enough alone time, downtime, Sabbath time, outside interests, and just the healthier that we can be, the healthier our boundaries will be. Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's great. So, Sarah, would you mute my mic?
Thank you very much. Now, hopefully people can hear me much more clearly. And if just one of you would confirm that I am coming through.
You sound great.
Okay, good. So we're going to divide our presentation up into two big categories as we sort of thinking about topics that we want to cover today. We're going to be talking about the fact that we live in a 24/7 world now, and then later on we're going to talk about some privacy issues, or at least we're packaging them together that way. So in living in a 24/7 world, part of that comes from the cell phones that most of us carry in our pockets, and a lot of us are carrying smartphones now. And so we have access not just to the phone, and the phone's always with us, but also to text messages and to email and to lots of social media through various apps on our phones. And so the next thing that we would like to do is talk about that ubiquity of social media. And I think we've got another quick poll, is that right, Sarah, where we can talk about what social media folk here use. So hopefully they can just click on all the ones that they use, is that right?
Yeah, just give me a second to launch that poll. You guys keep talking.
Okay, well, we'll keep talking as she does that. So, oh, there it is. So go ahead and check which ones you use. As we were getting ready for this webinar today, Lizann and I were talking about the fact that I am much more into various social media than she is, that I do Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I have a Tumblr and a regular blog, and Lizann is a Facebooker, and that's about it. And you know, some of that difference may be generational as to how much we're involved in. I have a foot in both Gen X and in the baby boom, and Lizann's more of a boomer. So we got almost everybody is on Facebook, a lot of people doing LinkedIn, and a little less than half on the other three social media that are the biggies that people do. So that's really helpful. We're probably going to be talking mostly about Facebook when we talk specifically about social media, because Facebook is the most common one, as we've seen for our room here today, as well as for folk in general. So let's move on to our next slide and talk about the fact that we're always connected, and that, you know, that things can happen, like the phone can ring at an inopportune time. You know, you can be leading a webinar and the phone can ring, that sort of thing. And getting text messages and just the challenges that we face with that. Lizann, do you want to say something about how you've dealt with that or how you've seen it interrupting your ministry?
Yeah, I generally am very compartmental in what I do. I try not to have lots of things open at once, but that is difficult, particularly as media and technology have tried to package things in a way that is helpful for us and may not be. And so for me, what I often do is make sure that I have time completely away from any of my devices. And sometimes that means that I actually have to go out into the desert for 3 weeks. I happen to work from my home. I do a lot of consulting work. I'm a campus minister. And so I actually do need to keep my devices with me because in many ways my office is wherever I am going. And that has its own challenges. Jeff?
Yeah, and one of the other things is also expectations people have. In a local church, I find that, well, I emailed you, why haven't you responded yet? And that can be a challenge to just face. And then, you know, okay, there's yet one more social media that people are using. All of those things can be really challenging. But one of the things I think is important, if you go to the next slide, Sarah, is that we spend time just checking in with ourselves. You know, what is it that we're doing? How am I going to spend my time? So, you know, am I using this for, you know, this social media, is it going to really enhance my ministry, or am I using it for myself? You know, am I doing enough face-to-face ministry, or am I tucked away in doing that? And just, you know, needing, you know, what is it going to be that social media will do that will help me in my personal life? Lizann was talking about, you know, having balance being really important. And that actually raises one of the issues that comes up too, and we'll, you know, it's hard to divide these things up into categories, but the whole issue of why do you have an account, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But having that self-assessment, and there's sort of one big takeaway that we think comes out of all of this, and Sarah's right on top of it there, and that is that it is important to set aside Sabbath time. When the phone is off, when you're not available, that you have some downtime away from being hyper-connected, and it's just good for our bodies to do that. So let's move on to the next slide, and that is that this hyper-connected world, this 24/7 world, is that there is that expectation that we're always available and that somebody may have something urgent going on for them. I had that happen recently. I was trying to organize something for a conference meeting, and I didn't quite understand the schedule, so I sent a text message to the moderator of the conference to try to find out what the schedule was so that I could then line up somebody to do an activity. Well, I sent the text message on a Friday, and that's his Sabbath day, and he texted me back and said he'd get back to me tomorrow because it's his Sabbath day. And it was urgent for me, but it was a good boundary on his part to say, you know, this is my downtime. And so that can be a real challenge too. And that brings us to the next takeaway, which is that you don't always have to respond right now. That phone call can wait, the text message can wait, the email can wait. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that, Lizann?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. It is hard to do that. It's like those of us, again, baby boomers like me, who grew up with when the telephone rang, you answered it. And it was a Pavlovian thing, and you know, the telephone rings, you answer it. But that's not, we do not have to do that, and some of this is just sort of breaking ourselves of those habits. And And again, just reminding us that it's really hard when we're carrying our office with us wherever we go, on our phones, with our emails and everything. You see those things, and that actually gets into our next issue, so which is burnout, and that can happen so easily because it feels like we have to respond to everything immediately. If you're sitting in your office and someone walks in the door, that is different than if they send you a text message, or they send you an email, or they send you a Facebook message. And so it's really important to know that just because they have sent you that doesn't mean you have to respond to that immediately. And the other thing with burnout in terms of the social media is that we can get so, I'll speak for myself, I can get so hooked into it. I can go on Facebook to do something. I have to post an event. I have to post some information for people for a meeting, or for a conference, or for a workshop, or for a retreat. And once I'm on Facebook, it's really hard to not check my messages, to not check what other people are saying. And one thing can lead to another, and suddenly you realize that you've been on for an hour and you haven't had a chance to do other things that you were planning to do that morning or that afternoon, or often that happens in the evening. Jeff?
Yeah. Another one that happens to me on Facebook is a friend will post an article and I'll go, oh, I should read that, but I don't have time to do it now, so I'm going to save that article to read later. And the next thing I know, I've got 100 articles that have been saved for me to read later. And I can just feel so overwhelmed by that, and that can cause burnout too. And one of the mantras that I developed is, if Facebook didn't exist, I wouldn't have known that article exists. I don't have to read it. And just as a way to keep myself centered, that just because the information is there and just because a friend I respect posted it doesn't mean that I have to read it and know that information. I've gone through life not knowing a lot of stuff. And as you were saying, Lizann, the whole issue of dealing with Facebook and getting distracted, whatever, I find that for me, YouTube, that I go, a friend says, oh, you got to watch this YouTube, so I watch it, and then YouTube suggests something else I want to watch, and the next thing I know, 3 hours have passed. And that can be a problem. The other is, with all of the platforms that exist, I want to communicate with folk in my congregation because I'm using social media to meet professional goals. So how do I, okay, I need to share this. I want it to connect with the youth groups. So I know that I need to post it on Instagram for Cecilia to see it, and I need to post it. I need to tweet about, and I need to send that person a text message. And that can cause burnout too, which is a real challenge. So one of the things that I found helpful with Facebook, because I've got a ton of Facebook friends and lots of information in my newsfeed, how do I not miss the things that are most important to me? And Facebook has a tool for that called lists. And Twitter has a tool for that where you can make lists and just check in with a subset of your friends. And so I've created a list for members of the church that I'm Facebook friends with, so I don't miss things that they have posted, because I want to make sure that I don't miss something that's pastorally important. I found out several years ago about a member of the church having a miscarriage because of a bit obtuse thing that she posted on Facebook, but because I knew that she had been pregnant, I figured out what had happened. I found out just the other day about another member of my church falling and breaking her hip, and I wouldn't have known had I not seen it on Facebook. So I don't want to miss those things, but having that list that I can go to and cut through all of the other postings, that I find very helpful. And that sort of brings us to our next takeaway for the issue of burnout, and that is that there are tools that help, and you need to use the tool that works for you, whether that's, okay, I'm going to go on YouTube, and I know I can get lost on YouTube, so I'm setting a timer, I'm getting my egg timer out, or using tools that are built into the apps, built into the social media that you're using to help you keep that straight. And now we're ready to move on to our next bigger topic, which is privacy. And do you want to introduce this, Lizann?
Yes, thanks, Jeff. So one of the things, it seems very, very obvious, but it's good to say out loud, and that is when we're dealing with healthy boundaries as people who are in ministry and privacy and all of this, when we're using these amazing and wonderful tools that can really enhance our ministry, we need to remember that we should not do anything with social media or email or any of these tools that we would not do face-to-face. And that gets into the really big issues around things like ministers getting into trouble or people that are in ministry getting into trouble around sexual misconduct. It is just so important, but it is easy to forget when we're posting something on social media or we're in Facebook, using Facebook to chat with people, that it is important to not do anything in those platforms that we would not do face-to-face.
Right.
Jeff?
So, you know, underneath privacy, and again, like I said earlier, there are lots of, well, does this belong here? Does that belong there? Is it a topic? Is it really, you know, a lot of these topics really don't stand alone. They interconnect with others. But there are lots of communication options, and we've talked about that before, about, you know, what is the best way to communicate with different people. I have a member of my church who's got some anxiety issues, and if I want to talk to her on the phone, what I need to do is send her a text message saying, I'd like to talk to you on the phone about blah, blah, blah. And so I'm going to be calling in about 30 seconds. And that's enough time for her to get ready to talk about that thing, and she'll answer all. And if I don't send the text message first, it won't work. That's the communication issue that she has, and that, you know, one of the luxuries of being in a pastoral-sized church is that I know that about her, so I can do what is helpful for her. But with so many options that are available, that, you know, that becomes then one of the big questions of what's the best way to communicate something. And this, you know, really takes us right to our takeaways, the question that you need to be asking yourself all the time, and that is this the right medium to be using for this communication? Should this be face-to-face? Should this be a phone call? Should this be an email? Should this be a post on Facebook? Should this be a blog post? Should this be an email blast to the whole congregation? You know, all of those are different ways of communicating, and I know that my tendency is to click reply to an email and send my response that way, and just because it's the easiest and I'm doing email and my head's in email mode. But sometimes it is so much easier to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, because really what I want to do is have a conversation to find out how something is working, even if it's something as simple as scheduling who's going to do the time with the children in worship. Sometimes it's easier just to pick up the phone and talk. And so remembering that, even though I have to go look up a phone number then, instead of just hitting the reply key, that's the important one. So asking that question, is this the right medium for this communication?
And I just want to piggyback on that and say one of the lovely things about some of this new technology is that it does give us a record. It gives us a thread. We can go back and actually look at what was said and what was not said. And so there are times when you definitely want to use something that will be in cyberspace forever so that you can go look at it. But is it something that needs to be in cyberspace forever that only you and that person can see, or a larger group? And those are just, it's just always really important anytime we communicate to know what the possible larger audience for something will be.
And I just realized I was missing one of the medium that that is available to us, and that's U.S. mail. And there are times where sending something written in an envelope with a stamp is really the best means of communication, like making a job offer. I think that that should be done the old-fashioned way. Maybe my boomer bits are showing there, but you're talking, Lizann, you mentioned, you know, wanting to have the record, and that brings us to email and the importance of email privacy and challenges around that. And you know, one of the issues that I always have with email is my assumption is that it is hackable. That, for instance, Gmail, you never delete. Well, when you click delete from your inbox, it doesn't really delete it, it archives it. And so it still exists there. And so if you really want something gone, you have to work much harder to get rid of it. And my assumption is that that email is hackable, and therefore it can't be totally confidential. That's my personal opinion. But also, I think it's important for folk working in the church or working in schools that they know what the policies are around email in particular, but social media as well if we're lucky enough to have written policies about those, and make sure you're following them. And another challenge with email is, you know, the issue of professional email versus personal email. And I really have worked hard to have my church email address be my work email address, and when somebody emails me about work stuff, that I want it to go to that work email address, and if they send it to my home email address, I will send them an email that my response will be, let's have this conversation at my work email address, or I'll include my work email address, some way of trying to point them over to that work email address. And you know, I think that it's fine to have more than one email address, and in fact, that's one of the takeaways that we have about email privacy. And it sort of goes with another topic that we're going to have a little bit later, and that is just the whole keeping personal stuff personal and professional stuff professional. And so by having more than one email account, that's one way to do that. Anything you wanted to add about email privacy, Lizann?
No, I think that's good. But I am going to double back and just say around Facebook, it's also okay to have more than one Facebook platform. To have a church Facebook platform, to have your own personal page. Facebook has some weird rules about that sort of thing, and so you actually can't have more than one. Well, you can if you make up a name, but it's okay to have different places and be much more compartmentalized and help people understand. Just because the media and social media and our devices begin to blur things to help us, we don't have to always take that help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go on to the next topic, which is about social media privacy, which you sort of launched into there, Lizann.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think a really important question to have to start with any social media, or medium, I guess that would be singular there, is why do I have this account? And that if I established my account so I could connect with my high school friends and my college friends, then I'm not having it for my professional persona. And so I want to set my privacy settings in a way that I don't have to worry about somebody from my professional settings misinterpreting something that I posted because my mindset when I'm in that social medium is my high school friends. And so that whole issue of, why do you have the account? Should you set up a second account? Those sorts of things. Should you set up a personal account but have a professional page would be another way to do it, as where you have that public open setting versus a closed setting. On other social media, that's not so important. I mean, there are privacy settings for Twitter, there are privacy settings for Instagram, where you become much significantly more private. But generally speaking, those are medium that tend to be out there and open, and so it's much similar to blogging. And the assumption is that anybody can see that, and so keeping that in mind. One of the tests that I have before I post something on a blog or on Facebook, because I tend to post things on Facebook that are open to everybody, is, am I okay with my mom seeing this? Am I okay with a future search committee seeing this? Am I okay with my niece and nephew seeing this? And if the answer to that is all yes, then it's okay to post. So that's just a little test that I do for that.
Yeah. So I want to jump in with this and talk about something that, particularly for local church pastors, but also for folks that are working in agencies and lay leaders. And that is not necessarily even about you and your boundaries, but about the boundaries of other people who are in the community that you serve. And we all know that it is important for us as professional people and people in leadership to have really good and clear boundaries. And we cannot control the boundary or boundarylessness of folks that we are working with and serving, but we have to keep that in mind. And so what pops into my mind at this point, Jeff and I were talking at one point about, he uses Pinterest a lot. I don't use Pinterest, but he does, and it reminds me of those people who glean. It is part of how their brains are wired to glean as much information as they can about people that they perceive to be in power or people that they perceive to be in leadership, so that they can feel more intimate and closer to those people. And so in terms of social media privacy, it's not just about our settings, but also always remembering that there are people who have different layers of their own understanding of boundaries who are looking at what we're posting and how they're going to use that information.
Right. There's
So
one other thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay. So just another thing to be aware of in social media, and that is location tagging. That's a feature that Facebook does, and I think other social media do as well. And just being aware, do you want that location tagging on or not? And that you need to pay attention to whether or not it's automatically tagging your location when you post something. Just to be aware of, because you may or may not want that included. So let's go here to our takeaway for social media privacy is to be clear about your own boundaries. Make sure that you know what it is, where your boundaries are when you're using social media. Why am I having this account? Who is it that's going to be seeing this? Am I comfortable with that? And being clear in your own boundaries, I just think, is a really important thing to do, because other people have their boundaries and may not get the boundaries that we need to be having. So another topic that we've got here under privacy is the issue of who owns the computer. That's the way I framed it, at least. So I'm a single guy, and if I decided I want to do some online dating, how would I go about doing that? Well, I would not do it on the church's computer, because this needs to be my personal stuff, and so I would do it on my computer at home. And in fact, I actually have two computers at home. One that is for, though I own it personally, is my home work computer. And then I've got a second cheap computer that if I decide I want to do online dating or something like that, I do it from that computer, because sometimes my home work computer, which is a laptop, comes in with me to work. And so a way to maintain that personal boundary is to always keep it in my home. And what are some other places, Lizann, where who owns the computer could come up as an issue?
I think that, yeah, I think that you've covered one of the most important ones. But for people, however, whatever your family situation or or who you're in relationship with, you do want to keep some things separate. And so, I mean, that's even around photos on your computer. Do you want, who do you want to have access to your personal photos? Who do you want to have access to your tax information? Who do you want to have access to all of the things that we now use our computers for? And so it's not a bad idea to actually have two devices and to keep those very private. I know in the real world, one of the things that was raised in a boundary training a year ago was, who do you have come in and babysit in your home? Is it someone who's connected to your church? And I had never even thought about that. But in many ways, sort of your computer and where it is physically may be opened up to larger knowledge from the larger group that you're working with. And so it's just really good to keep that in mind when you're thinking about these actual physical devices and the information that's on them.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have passwords on all of your electronic devices. So the takeaway here is that for personal computing, use your own computer, not the congregation's. So our last topic that we wanted to talk about is the issue of intimacy. And Lizann, why don't you start off with this, because I think you've got a story to share.
Yes, and so one of the things that's, again, so important is to not do or say anything in these wonderful technologies that you would not do personally. So there's a story of that a woman shared about a pastor who actually, they had known each other previously before this person had become a pastor. And the person contacted her on social media, on Facebook, and began to be very flirty. Well, it turns out that in the interim, the person had gotten married. So it was not a parishioner, but it was still not an appropriate relationship. And it's just important to remember that we need to not use these devices and these platforms in ways that we know that we shouldn't use them, or that we shouldn't do things face to face. Jeff?
And so there are some questions that I think are important to be asking as we move along with, particularly with social media, but also, in email and any communication is, what am I implying by what I'm sharing? And you can't always know that. Lizann brought up the issue of the person looking at the Pinterest account and feeling like they know me better because I posted a recipe for making tea, because that's about my culinary expertise. But that you can't control all implications. The people that have personality disorders and things like that may read stuff into things that aren't intended and you can't protect against. But just double checking, what am I implying by doing this? Another really important question to ask, I think all the time, but I think it fits underneath this topic the most, is whose need am I meeting? And so if I have my Facebook account because I'm wanting it to be recreational time for me, not work time for me, then I'm meeting I'm meeting my needs and that's fine, and I need to be careful then about not stepping over a boundary with the people I'm serving as a pastor or the students I'm serving as a teacher. Or am I meeting the needs of a parishioner here? I have a member of the church who I disagree with very strongly politically, and I keep wanting to correct him. Well, whose need is being met there when I try to correct him? Am I meeting my need to be right, or am I meeting some need that I think he has, or am I meeting some need that he has? And so I need to watch what I do to make sure that I'm not violating a boundary because I'm working to meet his needs. I'm doing that because my relationship with him is that of a pastor. What else do we want to say about this, Lizann?
I think that pretty much covers it. I know for me, I just have a basic rule, and that is that I don't post anything on social media that I don't mind everyone seeing. And what that often means is that I don't use social media to let people know in a blanket way what's going on in my life. If I'm having a bad day, if there's something going on in my personal relationships, I just don't use certainly Facebook that way, which many people and most people I think that use Facebook do use it that way, because it's not appropriate to put our personal things on Facebook in a way that will then hook people who are in our communities to feel like they need to take care of us.
Right, yeah. And that sort of brings up just another, we've got all these different ways to communicate, and there's so much potential in that. There's also so many more opportunities to be misunderstood. And it does create a challenge, and I think that cycles back then to the issue of burnout and the issue of always being connected in the 24/7 world, that it's really important to have Sabbath time as well. So our big takeaway here is the one Lizann has said twice, and that's that don't do or say anything in cyberspace that you wouldn't do or say face-to-face. And but I think it's connected too about all of these other things we talked about today, about setting aside Sabbath time for yourself to keep balance in your life, recognizing you don't have to respond to somebody right away, using the tools that exist in your own tool chest and the tools that folk have in the various social media, figuring out what the right medium is for the communication, setting up yourself so you have more than one email address, more than one Facebook account, whatever it is that you need for that, and setting personal space, that all of that connects with trying to make sure that we're not misunderstood.
Yeah. So Sarah, I don't know if folks have been asking questions as we've been going along. Do you have questions from people who are listening?
I do have a couple of questions, and I want to invite all of the audience members. If you have a question, this is a good time to submit it. First, I want to point out that there are some resources here that will be included in the PDF that I send you this afternoon. And some of this is social media terminology, some of it is clergy ethics articles that are available on our website, and some other things that we recommend. So just to give people submit your questions, and this is the list of takeaways that Jeff was talking about. So one question that has come in is about kind of a generational question about young people submitting pastoral care issues over social media, and perhaps older pastors not feeling as comfortable that that's the right place for that information to come to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's really important, and some of it, and it definitely is generational. Sort of old school, you have somebody say, well, I told so-and-so, or I told somebody about whatever this pastoral issue is, but they didn't specifically tell the pastor. So sometimes what will happen is that a younger generational person will post on Facebook or post on Twitter something really huge that's going on, and so suddenly many people know what it is, and sometimes that's how, as Jeff said earlier, that's how the pastor finds out. One of the things that we need to do is to understand that we cannot control other people's use of social media, but we need to respond in ways that are appropriate. And so I think for a pastor, a good rule is if someone has made something very public on social media, it is probably at that point okay for the pastor to make a short comment of concern under the post, but then to do a much more private connecting one-on-one with the person, either face-to-face or through email or through old school cards. But I think that it is almost expected at this point, if you do notice that someone has posted something that is of pastoral concern very publicly on Facebook, that it's not a bad idea to make a short comment so that it's obvious that you are aware of what's going on, and then to connect with that person in a much more one-on-one setting.
And
Jeff?
I think it's fine for a pastor to say, so the woman that fell and broke her hip, I found out about it because her daughter posted it on Facebook. I did essentially what Lizann said. I made a brief comment, oh no, how horrible. And then I sent a private message on Facebook to the daughter and said, can you tell me what hospital your mom is in so I can call on her? And the daughter responded to my query about what hospital in the comment thread of her original Facebook post. Okay, she made the choice of letting everybody know what hospital mom was in, but I decided that my query about what hospital would be more private, so I did a direct message or private message to the daughter as a way to connect with that. And I think it's fine for a pastor in any setting to say, I'm not comfortable having this conversation in this medium. Could we do it instead? I'm not comfortable having this conversation via email. Can I call you on the phone? That sort of thing.
Okay.
Do we have another question, Sarah?
Yeah, there is a question about the issue of confidentiality versus secrecy. And I think that this is coming up in relation to the idea of having two separate kind of lives, social media lives, so that maybe you have a separate Facebook for your personal stuff, and the sense that there's perhaps something wrong that everything isn't completely transparent, that one should be living one's life fully and transparently all the time. I wonder if you have any response to that.
I would say that there's a difference between confidentiality and secrecy, but there's also a third element in there, and that's privacy. And so, it's inappropriate to involve the members of my church in my dating life. And so I'm going to do that in a way that doesn't involve them and minimizes the possibility of them connecting with my dating life, because it's just not appropriate for them to be involved in it. And so just as, my medical condition, unless it's going to impact my ability to minister, really is none of the congregation's business. And so there's a difference between secrecy and privacy. And I'm of the school that the more integrated we are, the better, but that still doesn't mean we shouldn't have boundaries. And because of the way social media is set up, that if you really want to have a personal social media account and a private, a personal social media account and a professional presence in social media, you may need to do 2 accounts.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's the crux of it, definitely.
Okay, we had a question about social media policies, and I just want to let everyone know that we did a webinar on this topic, really for youth ministers specifically, but I think that the social media policy is something that most congregations, if not all congregations, really need to consider. And so I am wondering, Jeff and Lizann, if you've had any experience in kind of developing that kind of policy piece for your congregations or workplaces.
We've been working at it a little bit, and one of the big challenges with social media policies is that the media keep changing. There are new media that get added, the way Facebook is set up changes, and so how to keep your policies general enough that they're adaptive and specific enough that they're helpful is really hard, and I don't have a simple solution to that. Right now, my congregation's social media policy pretty much boils down to don't be a jerk, and that you know, it's when dealing with youth, you know, and it's hard to police too, because if a member of the church friends a minor on Facebook, what happens there, you know, even if that adult is the youth group leader, you know, it's hard to look over their shoulder. And how do you develop ways that you can look over someone's shoulder? And I don't think there are simple answers to that, other than looking at what social media are available, or social media policies are available, and picking and choosing. I think it's really important that policies don't get in the way of ministry. That's the challenge. That I think there's a tendency to be so concerned about safety that we lose the ability to be Christ to one another in the world.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And then adding a layer on top of that, if in your ministry you absolutely know that there are people who are recovering from and working through domestic violence issues or child abuse issues, you know, you've got to add extra layers in terms of social media and social policy to take into account those sorts of things, even going back to the check-in feature on Facebook and some of the other social medias. You just have to be very careful. If you know that there's a serious pastoral issue, particularly around domestic violence or dating violence, to make sure that those pieces very much are turned off.
Mm-hmm. And I think that helping youth and young adults, and heck, older adults that are getting into Facebook and understanding how it works, that there is an opportunity for ministry there in teaching about how do you do privacy settings, how do you block someone, how do you keep yourself safe, how do you as a member of the church have good boundaries in your use of social media. So I think all of that's helpful.
Yeah.
We still got time for another question if we got one there, Sarah.
Yeah, this is a question that kind of ties a lot of these different pieces that you've set out together, and it's really about the need to respond quickly, overwhelming one's ability to perhaps deal with the depth of an issue, or so someone is feeling a little pulled that they don't seem to have time to actually immerse themselves in an issue or immerse themselves in pastoral care with someone, because there is so much that has to be done all the time. And I know that's what this entire webinar was about, but I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with folks about how to deal with it's a very stressful, tense inducing thing.
I think, again, if you can go back to not the virtual world, but the real world, and if someone walks into your office and they, or into the outer office of the church, and they are insistent that they need to speak with you, how would you handle that? And there are times when all you have to do is say, let's make an appointment to talk. And remember that you can also do that on social media. When you see something that obviously screams crisis, or even is someone being insistent even though you don't perceive it to be a crisis, it's always okay to have a very quick connection with them, and set up a time that is going to be better for your energy and the flow of your work, so that you can be the most effective you can be when you're actually dealing with whatever it is that they are feeling so urgent about.
And I think it's important to remember that often ministry happens, the best ministry happens in the interruptions. And so having some openness to interruptions, I think, is important if we feel called to be doing ministry. So it's a balancing act. It's not always easy. And sometimes there's the stuff, the to-do lists that we have can be so big. And I find myself regularly saying, what on today's to-do list can wait until tomorrow, because this other stuff is more important, even though the stuff on the to-do list seems urgent. And so separating the urgent from the important is, I think, very important.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I want to let everyone know. Lizann, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, I just want to, again, I started with it, but I just want to end with it, and then I know we need to wrap up, and that is that the healthier we are, all of the rest of this will fall into place. The better we take care of ourselves physically, the better we take care of ourselves, making sure that we have Sabbath time and rest time. The better we are having intimate relationships with people outside of our work, the better we are in terms of just having that balance of people in our lives who we do not have to take care of, but we have a mutual relationship with, those friends and family members that we have a mutual relationship with. It will help exponentially in all of these other issues and help us as good people not do stupid things.
And that's what we should all strive for, not doing stupid things.
Here we are, yeah.
So I want to thank you both, Jeff and Lizann, for joining us today. And I want to let everyone know about our upcoming webinars. Our next webinar is August 25th. It's a roundtable discussion on campus sexual assault, which is a big issue, very important that we need to start talking about. And then September 30th, Reverend Marie Fortune is doing a webinar on power and control, understanding how faith can play a role in intimate violent partnerships. And then there's many more, so please go to our website and take a look. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And thanks to the In Faith Community Foundation for sponsoring our webinar. They're a really great partner, and we appreciate them. As you close out the webinar, you'll be invited to take a short survey, and if you would do that, we would be most appreciative. You can tell us about your opinions about today's webinar, give us ideas for future webinars, suggestions for other online opportunities. And you can see all of our upcoming webinars on our website at faithtrustinstitute.org. I want to thank you all for joining us, and this ends today's presentation. Thank you so much, Lizann and Jeff. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.